Hey everyone, Brian Mullin here. This is Fire and Ice Theory, Part 2. And I just want to go over a couple more things that I didn't talk about in Part 1, and also start off with the Go Fast rocket, which was brought up a lot of debate in the first part. And I have to admit that I did not know about yo-yo de-spin devices. I spent some time looking into them, and they're pretty awesome what they do. I didn't know such things existed. And so, according to the Go Fast team and some other videos, I found that apparently the yo-yo device went off at the height of the launch, or the maximum height of the launch, it appears, and that's what stopped the rocket from spinning. And you can actually see it. It looks like the yo-yo device at about 3 minutes and 46 seconds. The third camera. There's 3 cameras throughout the flight. They show, the recording of each camera over the whole video, and I want to focus on the first and last cameras. The second one is a lot like the first, and that also brings up the same question: why don't they ever have a camera pointing up? And we have 3 different cameras all taking video from different perspectives, but never one pointing up. Why doesn't anybody ever want to look out into space? But I don't know. So, anyway, going to the rocket. Now, the rocket had 2 stages, as I mentioned before, and you can see in the video. And each one of these stages has a mass, right? And the mass of the bottom stage can be assumed to be greater than the mass of the nose. I'm going to call the bottom the engine and the nose. So mass engine greater than mass nose, because this is where the engine is. You don't want a top-heavy rocket, so we can definitely assume this. I think it's safe to say that. And so, what happens at about 1 minute and 6 seconds on the first camera is, the rocket flies up, yo-yo device goes off, you can hear it, and the spinning stops, and then it's just kind of sitting there as it's reached its max height, and it's going to start falling back to Earth. And so the stages separate. Okay, you hear the noise, and you see the ice that's built up on the outside of the rocket break off. Okay, so all that ice kind of breaks off as the 2 stages separate. And so you would think that when the stages separate, they're forced apart. And I've looked into these devices, or the mechanicisms, whatever you want to call it, that separate the rockets, and some of them create a force between the 2 stages to push them apart. Okay? But it doesn't look like that happens at 1 minute and 6 seconds. It looks like they start to separate, and then there's the initial movement away from each other, and then you notice that the bottom stage, or the engine part of the rocket, starts to fall. The rate of its fall starts to increase after the initial separation. If you watch that around 1 minute and 6 seconds, watch that a few times. But then I said, okay, that's kind of a problem, that this piece is falling faster than this piece, because in a vacuum, or in the thermosphere where this is supposed to be, there should be hardly any matter. So these 2 objects should fall at the same rate, or they should accelerate towards Earth at the same rate. On Balls Out Physics episode 2 and 3, I can't remember which one at the moment, but I linked the video to I think it was called Human Universe, a BBC series where Professor Brian Cox came from the UK, the United States, to do an experiment with a bowling ball and some feathers in NASA's vacuum chamber at the Glenn Research Center, and they show how in a vacuum both objects fall or accelerate towards Earth at the same rate. So the same thing should happen here. Both of these objects should accelerate down at the same rate, unless they're in a liquid, because this one would be more massive, so it would fall faster. Or unless they were forced apart by the stage separation. That would create a force and an acceleration or an increased acceleration on the bottom stage. But if you go to about 3 minutes and 46 seconds where you see the yo-yo device go off, and then wait another 10 seconds to about 10:55 or 3:55 to 3:56, you hear the stage separation and you see the ice fly off, and you can also see the horizon from the way the camera's orientated. And I've watched this over and over again, and I do not see any acceleration from the separation. I do not see this piece accelerating up. And to have a force, you have to have an acceleration, because F equals ma. It does not appear like there is a force pushing these two pieces apart. And then if you watch the video throughout, you can see every now and then the nose camera catches the engine, and it's significantly farther down, or it's dropped significantly farther than this nose piece is. This nose piece, which you would think it would be very light, just kind of almost seems like it's floating, like there's buoyant forces acting on it. And this was really the premise of what I was talking about in the first episode. I didn't get into the fact that the acceleration of the engine appears to be greater than the acceleration of the nose. I mean, that's definitely true whether it's created by this force or they're in a liquid, and because this is more massive, a liquid or a gas, because this piece is more massive, it's falling faster than this piece is, because buoyancy is having a greater effect, or buoyant forces are having a greater effect on the nose, if you want to look at it that way. So, to me, it does not seem like there is a force in the stage separation. So, I think this is falling faster because it's in a liquid. And then another thing, there's ice crystals all over the outside of the rocket. Now, it gets cold as you go up, but in the thermosphere at 117 kilometers, bringing back this chart that you might be getting tired of seeing, go fast is here, temperature 200 degrees Celsius. Now, as we're told, in the thermosphere, you should see a cold temperature, so I guess the ice crystals could stay there. But still, listen to the sounds. It seems like there's some kind of liquid up there. It really does. I think so, but you be the judge. So, going back to fire and ice theory, I made a couple changes. I was assuming that this thermo layer was very hot. What if it's not? What if it's actually cold? And the sun is actually surrounded by cold, not hot. And infinite potential is what surrounds the sun. And this is why everything radiates up to that cold area that surrounds us. And also to the moon as well. I've still found that the moon is, the moonlight does appear to cool the Earth more than the surrounded shading areas. I've been doing experiments with that, which I'll get into in later videos. But yeah, this, how do we know that this isn't ice? How do we know that it's not really cold up there? We know that the temperatures are supposed to, the thermometer should show a cold temperature. So is what we're told really what's happening? Is it really a thermo layer? I don't know. Can we get rid of this altogether? And so it would be fire, ice, of course the moon, and then the layers around us. Well, since I don't know what to trust anymore, I've gone back to this a lot, especially recently. I was born into a Catholic family, and this is actually my mother's Bible, but I keep going back to this that I, a year and a half ago, made fun of to my roommate, and then had to put my foot in my mouth because, I don't know, this could actually be a depiction of our Earth or something similar to it. But as you can see, there are waters above the firmament in this picture, and then it has firmament of the sky, which might allude to some type of liquid up here, maybe. But, of course, this is an illustration. So I'm using this as my basis for now, because I've been pulled back to Christianity in so many different ways in the past few months. Really, after Balls Out Physics episode 4, all kinds of things started happening. And I'll be honest, I was a bit opposed to it until about the beginning of this year. Doors started opening, so to say. And what I want to point out is when I first started thinking about the moon and sun relationship after Balls Out Physics episode 4, I'll never forget this. I was home visiting my family, and I was taking my dog for a walk, and I started thinking moon and sun, moon and sun. I started thinking moon and sun, and then all of a sudden it hit me, moon, mom, and son, and I immediately thought the Virgin, potential Mother Mary. I didn't want to say that in the last episode because I'm not saying that the moon is actually Mother Mary, but it's kind of an echo, as the term I used in Givers and Receivers, if you saw that. And then the son, of course, being the son of the mother. And that was the point of the song at the end of the last episode as well, or the last part. And so the idea is that this is a mom and son relationship, not to be confused with Mary and Jesus. But it's interesting to think that potential, the sun is kinetic energy, obviously, and then the moon or ice around it would be the potential, infinite potential, and the expression of that potential is the sun. And I see a symbolic relationship or an echo, mimic, with the way God came into our world through a virgin mother and born as a son. Could be coincidental, but I don't know. It's not far-fetched for me to think that God would come into our world mimicking God's creation, or how part of it works. And so that was the first thing I thought, but I was hesitant to say that, or one of the first things I thought, and then the day I realized that, the corresponding mother-son moments that happened after that were just mind-blowing to me, between myself and other people around me. Right after I realized that, a very good friend of mine happened to call me, and I was in the middle of realizing this, fighting with my dog, and I'm just like, okay, I'll call him back. And he left me a voicemail, which he never does. And so I got back to the house, started to listen to the voicemail, and what had happened was he couldn't hang up his phone for some reason, so he just shoved it in his pocket. And he happened to be riding with his mother in a car. I know his mother well. And I proceeded to hear a conversation between he and his mother, and I said, oh, weird, I'm not listening to this, and I hung up. But there was a 4-minute message of mom and son left on my phone right after I started thinking about all this. So, could be a coincidence, but then shortly after that, there was another incident with my grandmother and her son, my uncle, who happened to be there, and I'm not going to get into that one because it's too personal, or too family personal, but it was just amazing how that came to be. And so I didn't want to, throw that out there because, it's all speculation or just coincidences, what people would say, but I don't really believe in coincidences anymore, so I think there's something to it. That's my theory, though. One more thing I want to point out is I did say H2O or water or something could be up here in the last episode. Now, I said divine water because, if a rocket hit water as it exists on Earth at that velocity, it would be destroyed, too. I mean, water is very dense. But I said divine water, but could it also be ether, or also spelled aether? Ether, I've seen. Plasma, maybe, but that would be a superheated gas, so it would be very hot. But there's other ideas for what is actually up there, if there's liquid up here, which I think the Go Fast rocket shows us. And then there's also the lunar wave, which Crow 777 films. So, ideas, throwing them out there. I'm really starting to see connections between spirituality and science and all this, though, and so I wanted to get that out there. So, till next time, peace.